Let's get straight into it. Let's talk about, and then I can go on vacation. So let's get straight into the new movie that, and I guess it's not so new. This is about the third week that it's been out, but took a chance, and after reviewing carefully all the different movie options that there were, took a chance and said, hey, you know what? Let's watch Fall Guy, The Fall Guy. A lot of publicity for this movie with Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling. A kind of interesting premiere publicity stunt as well. If you didn't know, this is a new movie that's basically a love letter to stuntmen everywhere. So at the premiere, they had like a choreographed fight breakout, and it was something that was kind of on Twitter if you were looking closely enough. But they did a media blitz for this movie to try to get people to go see it in theaters. I ended up seeing it on demand just because it was easier that way than going to a theater, trying to find the time, spending all that money. You know, I may or may not have a good enough time. I can pause it if I do it on demand. So there were a lot of advantages for on-demand viewing as opposed to just going to the theater. So decided to get it on demand, and I kind of love this movie. This movie is goofy, and it is just keeps on going. It reminds me of watching any kind of 80s action movie. I think that's exactly what they were trying to go for. If you're watching the video version of the podcast, we have the trailer up for you. Ryan Gosling plays a stuntman that goes through a terrible accident and is kind of in love with a camera operator who's played by Emily Blunt. And after about years being off the scene, he comes back to kind of rekindle his relationship with now director Emily Blunt, Emily Blunt's character Jody. And he is, basically doing the stunts for her in this new movie, but then gets caught up in a mystery to try to find the main character of the film. It is one of those films where you can watch it. You don't have to be that invested in the plot to kind of know what's going on. It still maintains this goofy sense of humor throughout. It feels self-aware when you watch this movie, that it's just really about the action. It's about the stunts that they do throughout the entire movie, and every single sequence. I mean, I really can't think of any sequence in the movie that doesn't have something like an amazing stunt that is first and foremost in the scene. It is like stuntman scene, stuntman scene, stuntman scene, stuntman scene, sprinkled in with a little bit of plot to keep you invested, but it's really a visually spectacular movie. When I first started watching this, I didn't realize, I was like, surely this is kind of CGI, but I think you start realizing that most of these things are practical. And after doing a little bit of research, most of these stunts in this movie are practical effects, which make it even more compelling to kind of go back and rewatch it, because you're like, oh, this is real. This is not like a slight from like watching Marvel movies or superhero movies, but I feel like after a long amount of time watching those superhero movies, you kind of get bored watching visual effects, the same old kind of thing. They have like a similar visual feeling to them when you start seeing like heavy CGI. And this was kind of nice because this seemed to be filmed in a way that was like, no, we're going to make this in like with a Star Wars type mentality, early Star Wars, where there wasn't that much visual effects. There was just it was practical completely. Some of the stunts in this thing is amazing. I think the plot and the relationship between the two characters is just enough to keep it going. Hannah Waddingham, who you might know from Ted Lasso, plays the antagonist in this film, and she does a really great job kind of separating herself from that that character of Ted Lasso. They put a wig on her, which probably is or they dye her hair brown, which is probably a good choice. Otherwise, you'd constantly be thinking about her character from Ted Lasso, because she is so emblematic of that character. So they do a good job basically separating her from that in this film, but she does a good job kind of moving the plot forward a little bit and making it making it move when it needs to move, right? There's a lot of improv scenes. It appears, I have no proof that this exists, but it feels like they left a lot of what people would call play in this movie. They left a lot of improv moments and a lot of extra lines that probably weren't written in the script, and they leave those moments in, and it feels natural when you're hearing these characters talk. There's something about certain films and certain TV shows. I would even levy this criticism at Breaking Bad, that Breaking Bad, it felt like every line was so sculpted that there were times when it didn't necessarily feel like this is two people actually talking to each other, maybe in a very intense way, but it seemed like it was so finely crafted that every single if, what was purposely put there because it was written there, right? It's kind of like what Pacino says about doing Mamet plays. Like, you don't leave out anything. You don't leave anything. You don't improv anything around Mamet's dialogue. You just do it, right? This one felt like they kind of left a lot of room for not only the characters' personalities to come out, but probably Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt's characters to come kind of be a part of this movie and make it into something a little bit more well-rounded and natural. It's a nice breath of fresh air. I fear that it didn't do as well as it probably should have. It seems like it's underperformed a little bit at the box office, but this movie is is really good. It's James Bond without the intensity of James Bond. It's Jason Bourne without the intensity of Jason Bourne. It is a comedy that is fully committed to making action sequences that are realistic and outrageous at the same time. It is an interesting, great movie to watch, and it's 2 hours and it just flies by. There are some lulls in the middle, but it's quickly picked up by an action scene that just kind of takes you out of that slumber a little bit when it starts to kind of calm down. It's just constantly going. The fictional movie that they're making in this movie is what is the name of that movie? It's called Moon. Hold on, I have to double check this. Let's see here. Metal Storm. Metal Storm seems like it's a play off of Dune. I'm gonna assume. Emily Blunt's character, obviously a director for the first time, is trying to make a movie behind the scenes, and they make it as frenetic as possible. They make it as fast paced as possible. When you see her scenes, people are coming up to her like rapid fire, and it's always kind of interesting to see a movie depict behind the scenes of a movie, right? And this one's amped up to 1,000. But if it's any element of truth, if there's any element of truth to the way that they depicted it being a director, it seems like it might be a whirlwind of an experience, constantly making decisions left and right. This one, very interesting to see how they would film something like this. And it kind of reminded me a long time ago. I think it was Universal or Disney. Disney or Universal had an example of how they pulled off these stunts, and they put it on display. So you would see, they would give a demonstration of how they would create these explosions. Now I'm sure, and how they do them in a safe manner, and especially recently, considering that we know that like there have been some really bad versions of this that have gone terribly wrong. Not to mention Rust. The shooting there, and then also I think Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows had a stuntman who was severely injured doing a stunt. So, but they were showing, when I was at Universal, they were showing basically a demonstration of how they do these things, and you really got to give it up to the people who do these things. And I think that that's what this movie is doing, is a tribute to those guys that don't get nearly as much credit as the actors themselves that are acting the scenes, that are the front man of the movie. But these guys are putting, every single stunt, they're putting their life on the line, and they're doing it in a safe manner and going through it to make these things entertaining and to make them visually spectacular. This movie, according to Wikipedia, I guess had the Guinness World Record for most car rolls in a movie, which I think was like 8 or 9. So just for that alone, I would go see that movie. Go see this movie. But also to, go see it to support just how difficult some of these things are to visually create. As a cinematographer myself, I'd like, it's interesting to see how they capture these things and how big the rigs get. And you start kind of understanding more and more just how many people are needed to be there in order to make something like this come to life, right? Not only in your post-production, but in your production itself. I mean, some of the rigs that are attached to cars and these jibs that are coming out of vehicles, it's astonishing what they're accomplishing. And you see some of the visual majesty you can see it right now, in the fake movie that they're building, because some of these sweeping cinematic shots are beautiful. But also, too, it's got to be a big work, a big lift to figure out before you start filming how you're going to capture this. Like, how are we going to capture this car scene and make sure we get every single shot the way that we want it? How do we optimize that time to make sure that we're not doing 900 takes, that we're only doing 9? I'm sure there's only a finite amount of time, or a finite amount of times you can put like a stuntman or put a production crew through something over and over again. That's why it's always interesting to see, for me, to see those behind the scenes moments of how they accomplish those things. There's a good one on Breaking Bad when the character of Gus Fring finally meets his end. You can see Vince Gilligan going through the stunt explosion a number of times and bringing it back, and you can kind of see the dolly that the camera's on. Those are the interesting things that I like to kind of look for and go, wow, how did they do that? And this movie, at the very end of the end credits, they roll basically a long video package of all the behind the scenes stunts in the movie, and that alone gives this movie a little bit more. It makes this movie bigger than. Makes this movie more impressive to me. That's what I'm trying to say. It makes this movie more impressive to me in the long run, seeing that all these things are practical. They didn't depend on computer graphics, and I think that's what makes this movie really, really cool. So again, if you get the opportunity, it's still in theaters right now, but you can get it on demand for $20. Go see The Fall Guy. It's a good movie. I think it's a rom-com that's trapped in an action movie, which it has a lot of energy and a lot of practical effects. It's a very, very cool, different type of cinematic experience. And frankly, right now, it's probably outside of Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and the movie If, it's probably the best thing to see out there. So it's go support these movies, because they'll make more of them if we support it with our wallet. So that is The Fall Guy, directed by David Leitch. It was out on May 3rd and in theaters right now. When we come back, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will talk about Hal Steinbrenner basically saying that the Yankees are not sustainable, taking a little bit of a play from the Steve Cohen playbook. Let's talk about some baseball when we get back. Let's take a quick break.